Hey everyone, and welcome to Cooking Companion TV. I'm Jenna Edwards, and this is a recipe demo of Cajun Gumbo. Sorry, vegans and vegetarians, right now there is no substitute for you, although I'm thinking about how I can make that happen. This is a family recipe straight from Louisiana. It's the real deal. So first, we've got to make some chicken broth, and I recommend making it from scratch so it's guaranteed to taste really good. So to do that, we'll start with browning 4 pounds of chicken thighs in 2 batches. So get the largest heavy bottom pot you have. This one is at least 7 quarts, if not more. And pour in 1 tablespoon of oil and heat the oil until it's smoking. Then add the thighs, skin side down, and let it brown for 5 to 6 minutes. And while they're browning, let's prep another piece of the recipe, like slicing the sausages. I like to cut it in half long ways and then slice little half moon pieces. And get as far as you can until it's time to flip the thighs. Obviously the thighs are more important here. You can come back to slicing the sausage while the other side of the sides brown. So all in all, the browning should only take about 10 minutes for both sides. Then remove the thighs and set them aside in a large bowl and brown the second half, which will be another 10 minutes for both sides. There will be popping oil, and it's very okay to be terrified of that. Once you've finished the second half of browning the thighs and they're removed from the pot, you have to pour off the oil and the fat that rendered from the browning process and pour it into a heat-proof bowl or container. And if you want, you can save the chicken fat for something else. I even use a paper towel to carefully blot up any remaining fat. Now we'll add the thighs back into the pot and stir in 1 chopped onion. And by the way, this broth recipe can be used anytime you need chicken broth. Now we'll reduce the heat to low, cover it, and cook it for 20 minutes, just until the chicken releases its juices. So we've got 20 minutes to prep some more. You can finish your sausage, or chop your green bell pepper, or chop another onion for the gumbo. This is what I call stacking your steps, using the downtime to get ready for the next steps. After 20 minutes, see that little bit of juice? That's what we want. Now we'll add 2 quarts of water, or 8 cups, and 2 bay leaves, plus 2 teaspoons of salt, and stir all that around and bring it to a simmer, which is pretty much when you see some movement without a lot of bubbles. And this will cook like this for 20 minutes, also covered. Now we'll start cooking the bell pepper and the chopped onion in some oil, maybe just half a teaspoon of oil. Now right now you only see my bell pepper because I only had 1 onion, which I've used in the broth, so I'm going to make do and skim out some of the onion pieces in the broth in a few minutes. This will slightly affect the flavor because onions react strongly to different methods of cooking, but it's all I had, so that's what I went with. And we want to brown the pepper and the onion, so I'm using medium heat, and I'll let the pieces sit there once they've been spread out so they can develop a browned skin. You can add celery if you like. It's not worth chopping up the celery, but if you can buy it already chopped in the Holy Trinity set, you can add it then. You also want to add garlic, 1 chopped clove of garlic at the very end, and saute until everything's clear with a little bit of a brown skin. Now the veggies will probably be done before the broth, so when they're done, turn off the heat and move the veggies to a bowl. But before the veggie pan cools too much, let's put it back over medium heat and add half of the sliced sausage and let it brown. After a few minutes, we'll turn the sausages and let them cook a few more minutes. In this time, you can start cleaning up the kitchen a little, or even start on your rice. And let's check on the chicken. So after 20 covered minutes, we'll remove the thighs. At this point, I like to spread them out on a cutting board so they can start to cool, and remove the skin if you can. That's important because we need to remove the meat from the bone. And then skim out any large bits like remaining onions or bay leaves, and we'll carefully transfer the broth to a large bowl to cool for about 10 minutes before defatting. Now let's go back to the chicken. Remove the skin from the thighs if you haven't already, and you can throw that out. And then remove the meat from the bone. I find it easiest to use 2 forks to pull the meat away. Don't worry about shredding the meat with the forks. We're just going to chop it up with a knife later. And it's time to remove our sausage. You can move it into the bowl with the veggies and immediately add half a bag of frozen okra. We'll eventually use the entire bag, but we need to deslime the okra, and the only way to do that is to steam it out. And we need space in the pan to do that. So let the okra brown in the sausage fat. We'll cook it on medium heat until the string comes out. So just leave it there while we work on the chicken meat again. And honestly, I always thought the okra slime was what thickened the gumbo, so I don't understand why it needs to be deslimed. I may have to ask Aunt Belinda about that. But that's the family recipe, and I'm honoring that here. But if you try it without desliming the okra, let me know what you think. So keep removing the meat from the thighs until they're all cleared. It's helpful to have someone else working on this for you because it does get exhausting. So let's check on that okra now. It's been a few minutes and I can see as I turn it that there's still some string, so it's not ready yet. Also, don't be delicate with the okra. It can fall apart, and it should fall apart during this stage. After a few more minutes, it should be done. So remove the first batch and add it to the veggie and sausage bowl and start your second batch of okra. Also, if you were alarmed at how much browning action has happened in this pan and you're thinking, holy cow, that is just overwhelming to think about cleaning, I'm going to show you how to clean this very, very easily, and this is why I love stainless steel cookware. So stay tuned at the end of the video and I'll show you how to clean this. So maybe by now all your chicken meat is off the bone. It's time to chop up the chicken with a large chef's knife, so it's in bite-sized pieces. Your broth should be cool enough to have separated by now, so we can start defatting it. If you do the broth a day early, you can let the broth cool in the fridge, uncovered overnight, and the fat will solidify, making this exponentially easier. But for the day of, we need a large spoon, which will gently push into the layer of fat on top, forcing it to spill into the spoon. And that's how we'll get most of the fat out. You'll see a layer of sediment between the fat and the broth. That will find its way into your spoon too, but any deeper than that and you're removing the broth. Now some of that is inevitable, especially if you're trying to get all the fat off, but we definitely want to keep as much of that as possible in the bowl. So just move the spoon around to different parts of the bowl. I find that the taller, more narrow bowls or pots are better for this because it decreases the surface area for the fat to spread out. So it makes the fat layer thicker, and this is then easier. You can spend a lot of time on this part, so check on your okra and finish that before coming back to defatting the broth. And once you're happy with where you are, add the broth back into your largest pot. Turn the heat on to medium and let the broth come to a low simmer. Now in the meantime, it's time to make a roux. This is the very traditional base for gumbo. It's a French technique of mixing together a fat and flour to make a paste. Your roux is responsible for the color of your gumbo. The most traditional pairing is lard or bacon fat and flour, but I have used duck fat and it was glorious. Today, it's a mix of bacon fat and chicken fat because I didn't have enough bacon fat. The roux is a delicate technique because it can burn easily if you let it sit for too long or get the heat too high. So you'll whisk together the fat and the flour. We're using half a cup of lard and 3/4 of a cup of flour, so this won't get very thick. We're cooking it until it's the color of peanut butter, and that is the key. So stay very close or else you'll have to start this all over again. So I've started this on low heat and I'm whisking as I see bubbles form in the roux. It looks like it's thickening, but once I turn the heat up and keep stirring, it thins out again. I think this took 15 to 20 minutes in all. I started turning up the heat a little as I became impatient, but I still stood there and I stirred frequently, and I even smelt the roux every few minutes to make sure I hadn't burned it. So eventually, at a low-medium heat, so that's just below medium, I got actual bubbles and I could finally see the color deepening. We're not quite to peanut butter yet, but I'm still stirring nervously. I would not go higher than this low medium for your heat level because you'll likely burn it before it turns the right color. It is supposed to take some time and it gets a nutty flavor and that darker color. So I finally get to a peanut butter color and I think I start to see it burning, so I'm gonna remove it from the heat ASAP and just keep stirring it so it doesn't burn. And honestly, next time I'll keep the heat a touch lower and just be patient. This cannot be rushed. We'll immediately add the roux to the broth and it will hiss and steam and bubble. It's not splattering, but the sound and the reaction is a tad alarming, especially if you aren't expecting it. So I'm pouring it close to the surface of the broth so there isn't any hot broth and fat splattering everywhere. Now add all your veggies and sausage and chicken to the pot. If you're using shrimp, you'll add those at the end. Now give it a good stir and add some Cajun seasoning like Tony Chacheres. If you're using something like that, you don't need to add your own salt. There is a lot of salt in Tony Chacheres. If you have access to filet, which is another gumbo tradition, stir that in too. But you'll either turn the heat on very low or just turn it off and cover for about 20 minutes or until the shrimp are cooked through. You don't really need heat for this part because the residual heat from all of the other ingredients will cook the shrimp. If you haven't already, you could do your rice now, so it's finished about the same time as the gumbo. Now, this will be good the day of cooking it. It will be better tomorrow, and even better the next day. If you freeze some and come back to it in a couple of weeks, you will be singing hallelujah. So while this is a lot of work, this produces a few gallons of gumbo, which can last a small family a long time. Of course, this is likely to become popular amongst your friends and family, so don't be surprised if it's requested often. Serve your gumbo with a small amount of rice. This is 1/3 cup for a dinner-sized portion. I did just stand there for 3 hours and smell all of this coming together, so I'm really hungry. Enjoy your fabulous gumbo. That's it for this family recipe. Get the ingredient list at cookingcompaniontv.com/gumbo. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe to this channel for more demos like this. I'm Jenna Edwards and thanks for watching. Okay, so let's take that super dirty pan that we've used to brown all of our vegetables and our sausage and the okra, and it just looks like there's this really thick browned layer that you'll never be able to scrub off without ruining the pan. Well, what you're gonna do is either while the pan is still hot from cooking or just put it over some low-ish heat. We're just gonna add in some water and then an acid. So I'm using distilled white vinegar. This is really similar to the technique of deglazing a pan when you're making, if you've browned like a steak or cooked a steak or any sort of meat in a pan and you have those brown bits and we make a pan sauce from that. This is very similar. We're gonna use the warm liquid and the acid to just let chemistry do its thing and pick it up. So once you've poured in the water and some vinegar, or if you have extra lemon juice or something, but distilled white vinegar, you only need a couple tablespoons and you're not gonna miss it. And take a spatula and just gently start scraping it up. And you can get most of your pan cleaned from that, and then you don't have to do any heavy duty scrubbing.